Hey everybody, welcome back to The Collective. We have another fantastic show for you planned out today. Very excited. We got both Travis and Seb rejoining us once again on the Days of Lavoie. Now that it's in the afternoon, we're not making Seb wake up early in the morning, so he's able to, to jump in with us. While I am excited about it, by all means you should be too. Like the show, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all of that good stuff to get your emails in the morning or afternoon, whenever we go live. But it'll be every day. Now, if you have any thoughts, questions, comments, anything at all, by all means, put them up in the comment section. We will engage them throughout the show, kind of like this one. Salty Jinx, evening, all. Winterstorm, Chris, Winterstorm jumps in as well. Good evening, all. And Salty. Good to see you, boys. Today, we're going to be talking about defining ourselves. And before we get into it, though, let's get an intro at least from Trav. I know you've been here a lot, but let's hit it up. Give us a quick 10, 15 seconds, and we'll dive right in.
Travis Bader. I've got a company, Silvercore Outdoors, and a podcast, the Silvercore Podcast. Happy to be here.
Outstanding. Now, we have a couple other little hits before we get into it. Patrick Grundle, good to see you. Good afternoon. Glenn, good to see you too, buddy. What's up, y'all?
Hey, Pat.
There you go. We got, so defining ourselves. This was an interesting one for myself to, actually research, because this is a big question. How do we define ourselves? So I went to the very beginning of it. The Latin, cogito ergo sum, usually translated in English as I think, therefore I am, is the first principle of René Descartes' philosophy. The statement became a fundamental element of Western philosophy, as it was purported to provide a certain foundation for knowledge in the face of radical doubt. While other knowledge could be a figment of imagination, deception, or mistake, Descartes asserted that the very act of doubting one's own existence served, at a minimum, as proof of the reality of one's own mind. There must be a thinking entity, in this case the self, for there to be a thought. So, I know it's a very broad way to enter into this conversation, but let's start it off with some first thoughts. Trav? What about yourself? When I say defining
I don't know if
ourselves?
you want to start with me.
Oh, yeah. Let's do it.
So Descartes, although that was attributed to him, I believe there were others around his time, well before him, that said very similar things. Some of the Greek philosophers would say something similar. The Chinese philosophers way back before we talk about it. I don't think that defining oneself is something that's going to be easy or actually necessarily good. I think we can look at our past actions and we can create parameters that we can work within based on past successes and failures that we've seen. We can define others, possibly incorrectly, but we can use that so that we can interact with people in a more fluid way. But for us to define ourselves, I think we're imposing self-limitations if we're going to look at sort of the textbook definition of define. Whether that's parameters or giving an exact definition, I don't think you can do it. And I can elaborate on that one a fair bit, but I figured those are my opening thoughts on it, and I'll pass it over.
I like it. That's a good start. Zeb, what are your first thoughts?
Yeah, I feel the exact same way. I generally will focus on what it is that is important to me, as far as what is my mission here, what is my purpose, and so ultimately, from a sort of a broader overarching principle, I want to be a good person, say, for example. That is the way that I would define myself. But having an actual, letting anything particularly define myself is something that I try to avoid at all costs. I try to have humans are very complex, and we like to oversimplify certain things so that we can make sense of them. For me, it's all about having the least amount of single things that define me. Because when that thing is taken away from you, now what? Now you start questioning your sense of self-worth. You start questioning whether or not you're on the right path. You start questioning whether or not you're doing things correctly. So for me, it's quite the opposite. I want to define myself by what I want to be as a person, but I want to let the least amount of individual pieces define me, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. Shaun, what are your first thoughts on this, Mr. Roboto?
I think, therefore I am, doesn't confer upon the individual that their thoughts are correct in order for them to become what they need to be.
Dang, that is that's a good way to start it. I'm going to come back to you, Travis. Thoughts on what's been said so far?
Thoughts on all of that? Yeah, I mean that's the thing that everyone talks about since the beginning of time. Like, what is it that makes us us? And to, you know, some people would call it your ego that you start getting wrapped up in. I am what? My job? You asked me to give an introduction of myself at the beginning of the podcast. I talked about a company I own, a podcast that I host, but they aren't me. Am I a woodworker? Am I a metalworker? Do I like to surf? Sure, there's the things that I do, but it's not me. I've been a subject matter expert in all levels of court, primarily on weapons and firearms related things. But even like if I were to turn around and say, oh, I'm a subject matter expert, that would be wrong because I'm not. And even the court look at that and they would say, well, maybe you were in the last case, but we're going to have to qualify you again in this next case. And maybe I am, or maybe I make it or I don't. None of these things will define me as a person in the now or moving forward. There are things that I've done in the past, and I can use those to help me create a bit of the easy thought process as I move forward. Hey, that worked for me in the past. I'm an honest person. That works for me. Have I lied in the past? Sure. Everyone has. I lie in the future. Well, no, I've got a framework that I'm going to work from. Well, maybe I haven't been presented with the opportunity to deviate from that. Somebody's threatening the safety of my children and I have to lie to help them. Okay, I guess I'm going to lie, right? Doesn't matter what packets or parameters we put around ourselves. Now, I think we have to be adaptable and fluid as we move forward in order to, and by defining yourself, you're essentially possibly removing some of that adaptability.
Interesting. Seb, thoughts on this?
Yeah, I don't have much to add on specific point in the sense that it's kind of in line again with what I was talking about earlier, which is not painting a box around ourselves. You know, it said that ants will stay in a box if you take a marker and make a box around them, and they will it's not a question of self-definition because we don't actually know what ants are thinking and how they're thinking, but we do know that they're not exiting the box. And now, you know, science might say that the smell is keeping them within the box. The philosophical side of me wants to think that they remain willfully within the box because they drew it upon themselves. And so, yeah, I mean, for me, it's all about having a multi-layered approach to living this life. As Shaun always says, you know, live life as an adventure and make sure that I develop in as many of those layers as is humanly possible as far as for me in the present time. And sometimes even step out of my skin to have a look at the overall picture to see if there's certain things that I'm missing, certain layers that I haven't addressed, because you can get comfortable in your own sort of persona to the point where you start redefining yourself without realizing that you are doing it. So it's important to take that step out of yourself so that you're able to have a bird's eye view on what it is that you are doing and how much of it defines you.
I'm coming back to you, Shaun. What do you got?
Just had a thought. That's a play on words. My wife just came in with a morning shot of Wanda coffee. It's warm. Here in Japan, you can hit a vending machine and it comes out warm, just like this one is also warm. So I've got 2 cups of coffee that I've never drank before. And instinctually, what I did when I cracked the top on this thing was I had 2 deep smells on it. Because instinctually over many years, I've driven into my frame, into my brain, into my matrix body, the routine of I must curiously experience the fullness of the moment that I'm about to enter into, which is this, again, morning shot of coffee. It's not a bad coffee, all things considered. It's a warm vending machine coffee. But here's the difference between I think, therefore I am. How deeply and how curiously you consider the world around you are your thoughts. And your thoughts, depending on how deep they are, will define how deep your life is. And therefore, the I am part is driven by how curious you dive into the world around you. I could have cracked this, guzzled it, and not said another word because I'm not thinking another word. But just that simple smell of that coffee has an entire, I've got a half a book of thoughts that I could drop just on this coffee. But those are a half a book of thoughts created by, I don't know, over 2 decades of starting to deeply think about coffee. And so my point is this: I think, therefore I am is only as rich as the life you've lived thoughtfully.
I'm really liking where this conversation is going. And just as a quick reminder, if there's anybody out there that would like to ask questions, by all means, put them in the comment section so we can hit those up. Really quickly, Winterstorm jumped in here. He said, watching with my wife. Let's make this good. And then he asks, is the true definition of self the ability to change that answer minute by minute? Which kind of goes in line with what you were talking about, Seb. But also, I wanted to add this onto it. Is, we talked about creating your why. And I think that this plays into it a little bit, because to really create your why, you have to really dive into yourself as to what it is you're doing. Why are you doing it? How do you break that down into the most simplified version that you can make it? But as we just were discussing, that, everything has a depth of nuance beyond that depth of nuance. So how do we truly define ourselves without simplifying it to a point that we can have an answer? Seb, what do you think?
Do we ever have an answer?
That's, I guess, is the question. Do we?
I don't know. I mean, when Shaun was speaking and he was describing, the coffee and his experience with this coffee, he said something that we all say from time to time: this was warm or this was hot. Okay, compared to what?
Exactly.
Like, compared to what? Is it hot for a coffee or is it hot for a volcano? So that is essentially that exploration that Shaun is talking about, is exactly where we start diving a little bit deeper into these questions and try to get some sort of depth to ourselves. And make no mistake about it, gentlemen, we're all humans. We're all going to get stuck in some boxes at times. But if we operate even a little bit below surface, we're experiencing a depth of life that is almost unheard of, because not very many people do that.
That's a great point. Travis, what are you thinking?
Oh, I like it. I like the fact that Seb jumped on that. That's actually right in my notes here. I was taking notes of everything that Shaun used to describe that coffee, because when we're looking at defining ourselves, it's a comparative process. Compared to what? This table's hard? Well, maybe, but I'm comparing it to my soft fingers. I'm touching it here. That coffee's hot, and he's not bad based on decades of coffee drinking. We have to realize that, oftentimes people say, put your oxygen mask on first. You got to take care of yourself, right? In some instances, that's going to be good advice. But in a lot of instances, your surrounding around you is something that's going to end up helping you more. Though helping others around you, being of service to others, being in tune with your natural environment, being in tune with you guys right here on the podcast is what's defining the moment. It's not just me talking and saying words. We're listening and we're interacting with everything that's happening here. I don't think we can define ourselves without a comparative process. And if we're going to be using those comparisons, then we're going to have to also incorporate that into ourselves.
Shaun, what are you thinking?
Well, I think simple thoughts create a simple man, and there's nothing wrong with that if you choose to be a simple man. However, the idealized version of a human, I believe, is exploring the fullness of their potential that they don't understand yet. And the only way to understand that is to explore. And so I believe it comes down to this. Most people who aren't seekers, who aren't adventurers in their mind and in their external experience, within their internal experience, contextualized against everything around them. If they're not used to adventuring, if they're not used to seeking, it's probably because they don't understand the joy in it, the return on it, the richness of it, the fullness of life of it. And I understand that a simple life can be a good thing if, in fact, while it's externally viewed as a simple life, you have a full life within you. If you're a pig farmer in the middle of the frozen steppes of Kyrgyzstan, and your simple life is as simple as get up, look after your pigs and your family, and then go to bed and wash and repeat for the rest of your life, that can be a richer life, a more complex life, a more fulfilling life, a more beautiful life than a Wall Street banker hustling and bustling down on Wall Street. I think it really just depends on how much thought you've put into what this journey is called life. If you believe that it's simply waking up and washing and repeating the 24-hour cycle till you die, then not only is that a simple way to view life, you're a simple man, irrespective of what car you drive or what plane you own. So I believe that all of us have this opportunity to think more deeply than simple. And the outcome of that will be, you might appear to be a simple man from external observation, but you're leading a richer life than most people who are assessing your simple life. So my point would be this, that all of us, I believe, have a responsibility, not just an opportunity, but a responsibility to, at least from time to time, pause for a moment and consider how short life is and how much we can do with it without doing things. You don't have to get busier to become richer.
Busyness is a tough one. I know for a very long time I used to think busyness was a mark of pride. Like, oh yeah, no, I'm super busy. I got all kinds of things I'm doing. I'm doing these things, blah blah blah, without any real thought or depth or of understanding as to why I was busy. I just saw that being busy or filling my time or developing that work consistently was something that I needed to do. It wasn't until a long period after where I figured out that I was assessing my worth by the amount of work that I could do. And that stemmed from a long period of other things. But the question I have in amongst this is that, we're talking about adventure or having an adventurous mindset or, diving into things that are outside of your purview, of our purview. But adventure is inherently dangerous, right? You're entering into the unknown. You're reaching beyond what you are comfortable with. Or, I mean, if you think about the physical side of adventuring, back in the 1600s, you're going to go explore the new world. That's an inherently dangerous situation to put yourself into. So I'm wondering what your guys' thoughts are on the danger involved in adventure. And I don't mean sometimes the physical, but sometimes the metaphysical, sometimes the psychological. Seb, I'm going to come to you first on this one. What do you think?
Mm-hmm. What kind of perceived safety you figure you have by being anywhere? Like who's to know? Like life goes like this. The plane you take, the plane you don't take, the shift you take, the shift you don't take, the person you decide to associate with or not, the relationship you get involved in, the coffee you go get or not get, the things that you explore or not, anything has a risk associated with it. Anything does. How do you know where you're going to step off? And why are you trying to control that? That appearance of control is extremely deceitful. It is absolutely. And there's a saying that says, death catches up to those who run first. There's a reason for that. is because there is no control. There's no controlling this. And so you're calling it an area of danger, and I call it an area of risk. Life is all about risk management. And the risk management process has to be weighed in cost benefit in relation to how much exploration you want to do and how much life you want to live. You can live the safest life anybody's ever lived, and you won't want any part of it.
That's a great point. Travis, thoughts on this?
Well, I've tend to live a safety third kind of a life, but the danger of taking these risks, I would flip that and say it's far more dangerous to live a life not worth living. Far more dangerous than to do nothing. It's far more dangerous to do nothing than to take those risks and see what could possibly happen. Is death or injury a byproduct possibility? Sure it is, but just like Seb said, an engine of a plane could fall off and hit you while you're sitting on the couch playing video games. Why not go out there and live vicariously? And if we're defining ourselves, and I'm trying to bring it back to like the defining oneself, and talk about living an adventurous life, I feel if you can enjoy your life and you share that enjoyment with others, you're living a life worthwhile. So take those risks, put parameters around yourself that help you as you navigate through, and take smart risks. But I wouldn't say define yourself, because then you're going to start cutting things off that situation presents itself. Maybe you should be open to.
Yeah, absolutely. Shaun, thoughts on this?
Sure. You mentioned, some of the earliest adventures and the dangers involved, and so I'm getting to experience those as a proxy through museums right now. So when we were in Malaysia, as an example, we've been to multiple museums and historical spots where 600, 700, 800 years ago, there was X, 6,000, 7,000 years ago, there was Y, and then there's a Z. And so standing in those spots as a modern adventurer, I'm getting contextuality against former adventurers, where they were setting the stage for the world that we live in. Sir Francis Xavier, we were standing at a church up on St. Mary's Hill in Malaysia, in Malacca, where that individual spread religion across a broad swath of Asia, and is considered as secondary or second position to St. Paul the Apostle, as having impacted a large chunk of humanity through his words, through his presence, through his thoughts, through his actions, through his human experience, that none of us have a magic wand. None of us can shape the world simply by existing. These things require forethought, they require presence, they require action, they require you to live a full enough life that it impacts other lives. When Xavier was wandering through Asia spreading his word, a word, the word, whatever you want to contextualize it as, he was impacting others simply by being him. And I think that in order to be you and impact others, you have to consider who you are, why you're doing it, how you're going to do it, and then start doing it. And so we all have the opportunity in our modern world now to not be him, but follow in his footsteps through contemplative thoughts and deliberate actions in order to cause change at whatever scale we can. But why cause change? No one has to do anything, I suppose. But I think that change is inherently at the core of the human experience, where we want not just more for ourselves. If you're a good person, it's not that you want to have more money as a Wall Street banker. If you're a good person, I believe that change is more ephemeral, perhaps more metaphysical, perhaps more righteous in the sense that we simply want more for those around us. We want to make their lives richer. We want to help them understand that there's more to life than just living. And so, having stood on these spots in history over the last 5+ weeks, I think that I have pretty good context as to what adventurers used to do and what adventurers can still do today, just by their actions, their thoughts, and spreading their own, for lack of a better term, gospel.
Dang, man, that's a powerful position. Seb, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, a few. I really like that. Ultimately, if it wasn't for exploratory minds, where would we be today? None of the stuff that we experience in the human experience that we're experiencing currently, regardless of what's going on in the world, we wouldn't have experienced any of it, and it wouldn't have been different. It would have been exactly what it was, and it would have been copycatting everybody's life, over the course of centuries, and richness would have never sort of percolated from that. But one thing that Shaun said that was really interesting, that I really agree with, that I think is something that we need to think about, is the concept that the Sir was doing this for himself. And I feel that the way certain people live their life is to consistently get the definition of who they are for external validation. So to get other people, it's more about other people than it is about themselves. And to be truly impactful, it has to be authentic. And in order to be authentic, it needs to be about you. So should you decide to let certain things be a part of who you are, there has to be a gatekeeping process in that. This is not just how people perceive you. This is you speaking to you. This is your sense of self-worth in relation to what life is going to throw at you. How you react to the adversity of life is going to be deeply anchored into what you think of you.
Yeah, absolutely. Trev, thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, I can't do better than what Shaun and Seb did there, but I can add some maybe nuance to it. Shaun's talking about the Apostle Paul and the Wall Street banker and striving for money. Maybe that's what somebody defines himself as. I'm the person who's the highfalutin stockbroker, and I'm making money. And we've all heard that saying, money is the root of all evil. But the actual saying was in a letter from Paul to Timothy, and it was, for the love of money is the root of all evil, for where man erred from his faith. Oh, for the love of money is the root of all evil, which will some have coveted after man has erred from his faith and pierced himself through with many sorrows. That individual who's defined himself as the person who makes money is going to be a very unhappy person, is one way to read that saying there. And you need to have a better sense of what that self is. And I think that sense of self kind of goes back to, at least from my opinion, is broader than just you. You can't have a sense of self without those around you, because there needs to be a comparative piece there. People may say, like, just from a physical aspect, I'm tall. Well, if everyone I'm around is taller than me, maybe I'm not tall. I'm good. Well, compared to what? And like Seb was saying earlier, this coffee's hot. Well, compared to what? A volcano? So we have to remember that we are all very much connected. And if we want to define ourselves, I think we have to look closely to our environment around us and those around us.
Yeah, definitely agree with that one. Shaun, any thoughts on this one?
Well, here we are, all connected in our modern world through something called the collective. And so why are we all here? Because we have context as to why we're all commonly driven, focused, motivated to do what we're doing right now and in the future. I think that we can talk about individuals or individual actions and the importance of self-belief in what you're doing is for the betterment of those around you. But I also believe that hand in hand, you have to consider your actions within a group, just as the collective is a group to some degree, where we all feel that we're doing the right thing. And so our sense of who we are is through our own internal reflections and contextuality amongst the world around us, but it's also the sense of who we are within our group, within the groups that we are involved with, not just the collective, but within our various sports or hobbies or families or friendships or etc. I think that there's a duality to our existence. It's a solo journey, of course, but it's also a group effort life as well. And therefore, I think from time to time, it's healthy to pause and not just consider who we are within ourselves, within this existence, and how we think of who we are, but it's also a good idea to reflect on our existence against who we exist with as the idealized version of our group self. And if you categorize group to group to group to group, you should be considering, do I feel good about the group or groups that I'm involved with? I can easily and casually state that I feel real good about being part of the collective based on the solo journey individuals that are part of this group. We all have our solo journeys. And if I contextualize my solo journey against those solo journeys, I should feel good about being a part of those group solo journeys. So individually and group is a duality that you can consider. Are you thinking deeply enough rather than too simply?
This brings up an excellent point, and I've been thinking in my head that's been bubbling around as this it's a Venn diagram, really. If you're talking about yourself, you have yourself in the mixtures of different experiences that we've created over time. So I'm thinking back, when I first got out of the military, the only thing I had in there was I was a soldier. And then I started adding things as I started thinking about them, as I started developing those skill sets, as I started developing the different experiences that I've had, kind of added a little bubble to that Venn diagram, and it slowly built out into more of a three-dimensional model of who I am. But through the collective, one of the things that I've learned is that you can't just accept that those things are going to continually be there, right? You can't continually look at back and be, oh yeah, no, I'm still a soldier, because I'm not, right? I would say, I'm a horseman, but I haven't been on a horse in 6-7 months, right? So like, am I really a horseman at this point in time? Am I living that life? As Shaun likes to remind me every once in a while, I didn't go hunting this year. Does that mean I'm not a hunter at this point in time in my life, or does that mean I am still a hunter? So there's lots of these titles that we can throw around based on the experiences that we have. But I'm wondering more as like, how often should we be reflecting on this Venn diagram of ourselves into like, what do we take out and what do we add in, and how do we create this, or how often should we be updating this three-dimensional model that is us? Trav, what do you think?
I think it's healthier not to. I think to look into the past and we can say, this is what I was, here's what I've done. We can look in the present, we can say, here's what I'm doing. But to look forward and say, this is what I am moving forward, in general, broad strokes, we can probably have some accurate predictions as to where we can be, but we got to be open to what's going on in the future. I mean, like if I was to define cow and say a cow is a herbivore, it's not a carnivore, it doesn't eat meat. Well, actually, cows will eat meat, ungulates will eat meat. Same way that Chance, I bet you're not a cannibal. Mind you, we could say the same thing about these guys who crashed in the Andes. None of them were cannibals, but all of a sudden they found themselves in a situation. They have to be adaptable to that situation, and now they've got a choice they can make. The less rigid we are to these thought processes, and we look at what's happening around us and be adaptable as we move forward, while still holding what we feel to be true based on our upbringing, our past experiences and everything else, and holding that. I mean, those guys, they didn't have to eat other human flesh. That would be a choice, and they could die not as a cannibal, but that's a choice. To define ourselves moving forward, if you say, hey, I'm a soldier, well, you were a soldier. Hey, I'm a podcaster. Well, you are one right now. Are you one in the future? I don't know. Let's keep open. Maybe there's better ways that you can help people as you move forward. I think it's important to be adaptable and maybe not strictly define ourselves like that.
I like that. Seb, what are you thinking?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind is, why would you define yourself as a hunter? Why would you define you're a human being that likes to hunt from time to time. So now, if you don't do it for 7 months, does it change the fact that you like to hunt from time to time? Or maybe if you haven't had the financial means to do it, or maybe if you didn't have the time on account of family endeavors or whatever the case may be, what is it that makes you want to say, when do I stop being something? Let me tell you something. We don't change completely, we evolve. That evolution implies that the things that you used to be, i.e. a soldier, for example, in the proper sense of the word, has never changed, because the way you address life is in a soldier way, in a variety of different ways, from the tools that you've learned and the skills, knowledge, and abilities that you acquired during this complicated project called life. And so this is a very important conversation, because we have some of our veterans out there and some of our law enforcement veterans that are defining themselves as X, Y, and Z. And then when this is no longer there, they have lost who they are and their sense of self-worth. Whereas, and we've had this conversation before, I'm looking at it, that person is an evolutionary process, or went through an evolutionary process, and it's still very much within you. And so not only didn't define you in the first place, but it was never meant to define you. You let external factors make that happen. And so now all the experience, skills, knowledge, and abilities that you acquired over the exploratory life that you have lived, is the end result is what you have today. What you do tomorrow will not change everything that you have done. It will add to it. It will change it. It will morph it into something else. But had you not done the things, and if they weren't a part of you anymore, you would consistently be changing in a very different way, and not necessarily in a growing way, because change isn't always growth. Change does not always equate growth, unless all the experiences, skills, knowledge, and abilities that you draw upon to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. Shaun, thoughts on this one?
Well, if life is the plane and the plane crashes from time to time, we all get to decide what we're going to do in that moment. If we cling to the title of I'm not a cannibal, well, there's not going to be too many more days ahead of you. And so by ditching the idea, the rigid mindset of, well, I just don't do that, well, you've got about another week to a week and a half ahead of you. But if you can adopt a growth mindset, improvise, adapt, and overcome in the moment, and using a pretty extreme example of cannibalism in the Andes, of course, I mean, you get to make a decision. It's a binary moment that you either get right with it or you don't. Do you decide to then become a cannibal in the Andes? Well, I suppose, why would you do that? The why of the matter. Why extend your life? Why try to survive another week or two? Why? What? Because you think that someone's going to come and save you? Perhaps. Why? Because you hope to see your family sometime in the future? Why? Because you need to survive longer to help the team around you that is struggling in that plane wreck? The whys of the moment. That's what we all should be facing on a 24-hour cycle, the why of the now. And so, depending on the extremity of the moment, should drive the extremity of your rationale, of your choices in life as to striving to move forward or clinging to the past title of, I just don't eat like that. I just don't do like that. I just don't be like that. So every day we all get this binary decision of choice and clinging to the past, living in the now, or focusing on the future. Those are really the three states that we all get to operate in. And I don't believe that you have to only choose one and throw away the other two. I consider it as a hybridized model that you can, depending on how long you've been considering it and how long you've been playing with it as a three-dimensional construct, you can rapidly hybridize in the second, flowing back and forth between the three states to create the outcomes that you feel you need or know you need or desire for the future outcome that you are striving for. So my point would be this: don't cling to the past, exist in the now, but consider the future. But don't just think of them as three locked in solid states that don't interoperate on a fluidized, hybridized model.
This is a fascinating discussion. I'm loving this every second of it. So my question then is, a lot of people will think that, hey, I'm not going to be a cannibal until they're extremely hungry. And having never been that hungry before, how do you even know? Mm-hmm. Right? There's a lot of these things I was discussing in my jiu-jitsu class at one point. I was explaining to my students that, violence is going to happen at some point, and it's going to be all out. There's not going to be like a work your way into it and be like, oh, okay, well now we're going to do this. And we were talking about self-defense in that particular situations, but it is you never really know until you're put in that position. And so I'm wondering what your guys' thoughts are on, the development of skill sets that you can draw upon in those situations where all of a sudden now I'm in the Andes and I'm going to have to cannibalize one of my friends. Like that's a huge leap for someone that's never experienced other cultures and other styles of food. But I think for those that have eaten all kinds of different foods, that might not be as big of a leap if you guys are catching what I'm putting down here. So what are your guys' thoughts on that? Seb, I'm going to come to you. What do you think?
Mm-hmm. So go into exploration is what you're saying.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. I mean, look at what Shaun's doing right now. I mean, I would give anything to be doing that at this very moment. I think that's going to be such an enriching experience for him. And I always shake my head when people say, I've never left the province. I've never left the country. Like, Jesus, you ought to. The reason why we're having such a hard time to connect with other humans is because we're dehumanizing everybody that isn't us. It's because we're ethnocentric. It's because we're self-centered. And I'm not suggesting that they're doing it willfully. What I am suggesting is that it's just a byproduct of not being exposed, as you mentioned, not having the wheels to the pavement. And you think that's not catastrophic in the context of humanity? I got some really bad news. It is absolutely catastrophic. So I think that if there was more common ground and less dehumanization, we wouldn't be in the predicament we're in currently. And if you traveled enough, you would know that certain things that you have preconceived ideas about are completely false. And perhaps, even to an extreme, you're absolutely off. But you will never know because you're not exploring this. And so now what do? Now it becomes a defense mechanism, and now you're anchoring yourself in your own beliefs. And now nobody can have conversation with you to tell you otherwise, because otherwise your part of your identity is stripped away. I don't feel threatened when somebody challenges me. I have been around. I know I've been wrong plenty of time, and I will be wrong plenty of time in the future. It isn't scary to me. It's just a part of the process, and I love that. Actually, it makes me question. It makes me go on exploration again. It makes me want to find out more. Really establishing that connectivity between us. Nobody is coming to save the day. Nobody is. It's going to have to come internally. Starts with each and every single one of us as individuals and in the context of the collective after. But nothing happens until we do it individually.
Absolutely. Travis, what are you thinking on this?
There's a lot, the big subject. There's lots to ponder. I like that, anchored in beliefs. There's two things that I was kind of taken out of there. One, Seb's anchored in beliefs, and the other one's about past, present, and future that Shaun was talking about. You guys ever watch that show, The Prisoner, the old one with Patrick McGowan? That floaty ball would go. He was a spy. He was taken to an island, and anyways, he was a prisoner on this island. It was a weird island, but as you drive into the island, there's a sign that says, questions are a burden to others, answers are a burden to self. Or as Fight Club would put it, what you own owns you, right? If you anchor yourself in beliefs, you're not going to be open to all of these possible experiences that could enrich your life and enrich others as you go forward. It's also going to be something that people will have to square themselves with as they move forward. And I think it's more difficult for them to do that. If you're that cannibal who said, I'd never cannibalize, then you're in that situation and you look back with great regret because you have this self-identity that you've ascribed to yourself. You're going to have a much more difficult time. If I'm the soldier and I've experienced horrific events and I've got to move forward and I'm feeling certain ways, maybe understanding that this is just a natural process of life and how you're working through it would be a lot easier for a person to work in the future than it would if they're just married to those beliefs. So past, present, and future, or maybe it's just the everlasting now that we're dealing with.
This is very fascinating. I'm really digging this convo. Shaun, you got any something to add to this?
Yeah. So last night, it's morning here in Osaka, but last night, so that's approximately 12 hours ago, I went through a little walk through Osaka. I walked for about an hour by myself. Doreen was at a place called Spa World. Apparently it was awesome. But I wanted to go for a walk. And so I captured a little bit of it on my camera or on my smartphone, just little clips here, there, nothing of any significance. I didn't really focus on any particular moment. I simply just grabbed random fleeting moments that I cobbled together into a little movie clip and put up on my IG page that's about 10 minutes long. And again, nothing really notable other than a reflection of the evening of what is, I would say, typical of an evening stroll through Osaka, down into quite a busy part of Osaka, by the way. Now, what I didn't capture was after I finished the walk, I met Doreen, and then we walked around a bit more, and I said, okay, I'm going to go for a bite to eat. And I went back to a ramen shop, a little working man's local hole-in-the-wall, family-owned ramen shop, which was freaking amazing. I had gone to it earlier in the day with Doreen. It was a pork bone broth-based tonkatsu-style ramen shop. They make their own pork loin. They roast it in-house. So the char siu is amazing. The broth was unbelievable. The noodles were almost perfection. The whole symphony in that bowl was precisely why I came to Osaka. Now, I didn't cherry pick that restaurant before we flew overseas. What we did do, or what I did do, was when we checked into our hotel here in Osaka, I went to the hotel staff and I said, I need a recommendation on a ramen shop, on a restaurant nearby. What'd you recommend? And they said, well, do you want something that is here or there? And I said, definitely here. I want cheap and I want to go where you always go. And they started making some recommendations, said, well, where you go on the regular. What I'm looking for is where you love to have your lunch. So they all looked at each other and shrugged their shoulders and said, well, we go here. And so that's where Doreen and I went. We walked in, had our bowls. The owner of the shop interacted with us, not in a stiff way, but in a formal way, a typical formal relationship with a tourist that looks like me. And when I say looks like me, what I mean is Japan is very ethnocentric. When I was out on my walk last night, I walked past tens of thousands of people, and I can safely say that I saw less than 20 Caucasians in that walk. And so I stood out, is what I will say, just as we would have stood out when we were in that restaurant at lunchtime for that bowl of ramen. And so the not stiff conversation between myself and the owner, when I went to pay the bill, I tried to leave a small tip, and he took back the money and gave it to me. He said, Japanese, no tip. And I said, oh, no, it's okay. That was an amazing meal. Please take that. Thank you. Give it to the staff. And he said, no. And he was very formal with that. And I said, okay, no problems. Well, as a tip, please take a thank you very much for an amazing meal. I bounced. And I had no intention of going back, and not because of the somewhat formal moment. I understood what was going on, and I respected him for it. So there was no, geez, that was kind of awkward. What I thought was, I just won't be back because there's too many other places to eat it in Osaka. And so, as it turned out, much later that evening, I just had a feeling that I wanted to go back to that same place. So I said to Doreen, well, I'll meet you back at the hotel because I'm going to go in there and I'm going to have another bowl. And I didn't know what I was going to have. So I walked in, sat down. The owner looked at me, didn't give me a nod. It wasn't like high fives that, yeah, I can't believe you came back. It was just a observation. Then he kept on doing his thing, just as the staff did. Once I finished my bowl, I walked up to the cash register to pay. And I gave him, it came out to, we'll call it in Canadian dollars, $9.50 for what I ate. So I gave him, we'll call it a $10 bill. And when he went to give me the change, I said, no, please take the tip, I insist. And he hung on to it, and this is what he said to me. Thank you for the twice. Thank you for the twice. That was the tip. He knew, he recognized that I didn't have to come back. And I knew that I didn't have to come back. But the greatest tip perhaps that he got that day was the fact that a guy that looks like me, that's unusual in Osaka at the moment, went back to his restaurant as the tip, as the recognition, as the nod to him, that was so good, I came back. Thank you for the twice. And I haven't been able to get that out of my head. And isn't that the beauty of life? If you can strip away all of the nonsense, all of the white noise, all of the money exchange, the real exchange is spending more time with another person, not giving your time to them, but sharing the time, just as we did at that cash register at the end of that second bowl. We weren't holding hands and sitting around the campfire doing kumbaya. It was a 15-second nod to each other. We both shared that energy and understood what was going on in that now. We didn't understand it 10 seconds prior, but we'll understand it for the rest of our lives, just as I hope this message resonates with some people out there. Thank you for the twice.
Bam. Let's just end the show right there. I'm loving that. I really love that you brought that up, and I wish we had more time to dive into this. But let's go around real quick before we have to do some final thoughts. Seb, any thoughts on what Shaun just went over?
I think it's beautiful, man. I think it truly is beautiful. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that we make as human beings is not only are we trying to define ourselves with such solid lines, but we're also defining others. And when we do that, we stop ourselves from having the ability to do certain things that we perceive isn't going to be received well, or isn't going to be, something that they would appreciate. Or human connection knows no language, no boundaries, no religions, and yes, there are exceptions to this, but we are talking about good people, good humans. And I remember having a girlfriend that was Asian, and my wife, of course, was Asian, and so were my kids. But I remember her mom being very, very uncomfortable with being hugged. And I'm French Canadian. Like, we hug people. And for the longest time, she gave me the whole formal attitude, in a way. And for her, it wasn't necessarily an attitude. It was the way that she perceived she needed to act in my presence. And for me, we simply could not connect. And one day I told my girlfriend, and I said, next time we go meet with your mom, I'm going to give her the biggest hug she's ever gotten. I don't care if she doesn't like it. We shall see what happens, And she came to me and she said, thank you very much for coming. She placed her hand on my shoulder, and she was going to give me the old tap, tap, tap. And I gave her the biggest hug. Her eyes were this big. And from then on, that wall was gone. Like, she gave me hugs every time that she saw me. So I think that sometimes not only are we defining ourselves and staying within the parameters, but we also define others and keep them within the parameters, which prevent the connection.
That is a fantastic point. Travis, thoughts on this?
Yeah, there lots of thoughts, but also cognizant of the time. Really like Shaun's story there. The reason why I've been on the collective more than once, more than twice, is because every time I'm here, I leave feeling enriched. And I leave feeling enriched because of the connection that we were able to have. I try to open myself up, look at everybody's perspective, provide something that I think will be helpful for the people watching and listening in the group. And through that interaction, I get way more than I know than I ever provide to it. The defining of ourselves and defining of others. You know what? I think I'll leave it right where Seb had it there, because I don't know if I can say it better, particularly within the time constraints. But I do know I'm going to be going out for some ramen tonight. That's all that's in the back head now.
I as soon as I saw Shaun do his live, and he's like, I don't know if anybody here likes ramen, and I was like, oh, and I immediately started drooling. I was just like, oh, I really want some ramen. But yes, absolutely. There's a couple of comments I want to hit here, and then we'll do some final thoughts. I just want to make sure we touch on these. So Angela jumped in here, said, evening, everyone. Joined a bit late. Hope I didn't miss much. I think we've covered quite a bit, so there's a lot there. Winterstorm said, I think defining ourselves is impossible. Like the fact that observing a science experiment changes its outcome simply because you observe it. It's less defining and more not drawing boxes around you, which I think is a very astute point. Angela says risk versus reward. This is another great point to the conversation. And then we got Winterstorm jumps in here. He says that the collective merch idea. Don't define yourself. You're not a cannibal, but you could be if you try. that is a perfect way to sum this up. But let's get some final thoughts. Anything at all on anything we've gone over so far? Travis, I'm going to hit you first, and we'll work our way down. What do you think?
I thought we just did final thoughts, but no, I don't have anything else to include. Thank you.
Raj. Seb, anything still burning in the back of your brain? No? Raj, Shaun, anything at all?
Just real quick, I think for anyone who's here at the end or will be watching this later, please consider not just your role in life, but your responsibility in life, not just to yourself, but to those around you. The thing that we're all doing right now is a gift to ourselves, a gift to others. And hanging out with these guys today drew the best out of me. Not just drew the best out of me, but drew the best out of all of us, I feel, by sharing the moment correctly and wanting to do our best for each other in the collective. I think that is the key to life, is find people who you vibe with and draw the best out of you, and you'll start living a good life.
Yeah, absolutely. This is this collective, I mean, we've been doing this for 11 months and change now. We're 340-ish episodes in. I couldn't tell you the number right now, but it has been quite the enriching activity in terms of every day trying to show up, be present, and engage the conversation. And I wrote down in here when we were talking about change, be active in change. And I think that really sums it up in terms of what it is we're doing. We're not trying to define anything, but we're going to talk about it, and we're going to be active in the changes that we make. So continually I'm going to say this one more time. Learn, build, grow every day. And you can do that with us here on The Collective. We'll see y'all tomorrow. Chimo.
Chimo.